Good day, everyone. This is Aspie, and you're watching The Incredible Aspie. And today, I'd like to talk about a subject which I don't think I've seen a lot of other YouTubers talk about. Because it's sort of a niche issue, but at the same time, I think a lot of people will find it very interesting. Now, to introduce this subject, I think I should tell you all a story first. You see, 2015 was the year that I graduated from high school. There were about 500 or something students that graduated from my class that year, and I was one of only like 24 students that managed to get a 4.0 GPA or higher, if you can believe it. And as a reward for my accomplishment, my grandparents decided to take me on a vacation to the big island of Hawaii, because I'm an amateur surfer and I've always wanted to surf there. I mean, the big island isn't exactly known for its pristine waves, but at the same time, it's a free trip to Hawaii. I mean, who's going to complain about that? I mean, really. So, you know, I get there and it's beautiful, of course. I mean, it's very hot and humid, but that's Hawaii for you. And you know, the day after we get there, we drive down to the beach and we find this little shack on the beach that rents surfboards. So, you know, we walk in and there's this guy. He's very in shape, kind of a beach bum, but he's a very nice guy. And as I'm renting my surfboard from him, I mentioned to him this one spot which I found called Banyans, which is this pretty decent little spot that's located right behind a hotel. I mean, there's a little opening between the two buildings of the hotel where you can get to the spot from, but it's actually a relatively decent spot. So, you know, I mentioned it to him, but the second I mentioned the spot to him, he started laughing and told me to not surf Banyans. I mean, apparently, the locals do not like non-local surfers surfing on that spot. He even told me that he had been living there for 15 years and told me that he had never surfed the spot his entire time surfing there. He told me that he didn't surf the area because of respect for the locals. I personally think he just didn't want to get yelled at. So, you know, I was a bit bummed out because I had really wanted to surf that spot, but I decided to suck it up and I had a good time on the beach. And you know, this experience stayed with me for a very long time and I'd always wanted to do more research on the subject, and I decided now, since I have a YouTube channel, I think it would be pretty good to do a video on this subject and hopefully start a productive dialogue. The name for this phenomenon is known as a localized surf spot, or localism for short. If I had to briefly define it, I would say that a localized surf spot is a surfing area where local surfers expel or ward off non-local surfers through the use of harassment, intimidation, vandalism, and even violence. And I do believe that the most notable example of this phenomenon would have to be the example of Lunada Bay. Lunada Bay is about a mid-sized bay that is located in the Palos Verdes estates, which is in the most southern part of Los Angeles County, and the place is known for its large swells that barrel over through the place during the winter months, and it is also well known for a very territorial surf gang that occupies the area known as the Bay Boys. The Bay Boys were formed in the 1960s and were originally just like a fraternity or a group of friends that just liked to hang out and surf together. You know, they were very welcoming and very inclusive. However, their behavior changed in the 1970s after new leadership took hold of the group. And after that, the gang became very territorial and began even using malicious means to guard their spot, and it has remained this way up until this day.
The reason there's a lot of space is because we keep it like that. You fucking hassle people, we'll burn you every single way.
There have been reports of them, you know, throwing dirt clods, slashing tires, attacking people in the water, and even organizing attacks from their headquarters with walkie-talkies. Jeez, sounds like an episode of Count Dankula's Mad Lads. While this is pretty disgusting, it does work in keeping non-local surfers from trying to surf Lunada Bay. In response to this behavior, there have been multiple protests against the Lunada Bay Boys, one of which was organized by an ex-professional surfer who goes by the name Taloa. While there were multiple surfers, you know, gathered on the beach and were waiting to do the protest, at the end of the day, only a few of them actually had the balls to paddle out into the water. And for the few protesters who actually paddled out into the water, the Bay Boys pretty much, they showed some pretty interesting behavior on the beach. In one instance, one local paddled out to him wearing blackface and an afro wig and said he didn't pay enough taxes to surf there. Jeez, now this really sounds like an episode of Count Dankula's Mad Lads. If anybody knows Count Dankula, tell him about the Lunada Bay Boys and see if you can't get him to do a Mad Lads about the Lunada Bay Boys. It would probably be amazing. Now, there was another local who was actually on a surfboard out there with them, but he wasn't actually surfing. he was just paddling around the surfers trying to block them every time they got a wave. Doesn't sound exactly like fun to me. To me, these sound like a bunch of kids throwing a big tantrum. I mean, come on, dude. And Taloa was even assaulted by a man who, paddled to him and rammed into his surfboard out of nowhere and, injured his wrist. So you can see that these locals go to some extreme lengths to keep people from surfing on their spot. Eventually, there was a lawsuit litigated against the Bay Boys for harassment and a few other related things, They were accused of flashing female surfers who would go down to the beach and try to surf the waves, and all the other stuff that I mentioned. While the attention that was brought to this issue eventually led to their, little concrete bunker being torn down, the actual lawsuit was thrown out due to a lack of evidence. A lack of evidence? Really?
But we'll burn you every single way. But we'll burn you every single way. But we'll burn you every single way.
I should mention that there was a sting operation that was planned to be carried out, but it was called off the day before it actually took place. A report said that possibly hundreds knew about the sting operation before it actually took place. It's a very small neighborhood, and many members of the police department and even some of the local city officials may have some personal ties to the Bay Boys. According to the article, the leaking of the information about the sting operation may have been an accident, but the suspected relations between the Bay Boys and the police and the city officials really does raise some eyebrows. Now, before I go into any more conspiratorial subjects, I think I should just move ahead. Now, what are some of the reasons for this phenomenon? It does seem like common sense why some people, would try to keep people off their spot. I could talk about, the thinning of prize spots due to underwater development, or the ignorance of foreigners. They can be somewhat obnoxious and very rude. But I think the issue that underlies all the others is this concept of modernity. Now, in a qualitative study entitled Locals Only, The Impact of Modernity on a Local Surfing Context, the researcher Daskalos surveys a group of older surfers in Southern California about how modernity has affected their surfing experience. In the study, Daskalos defines modernity broadly as a set of mass societal changes that have come to define the 21st century. First of the three that I could find was the wide access of information. Before the invention of the TV, pretty much only people on the coast or people who lived on the islands, mainly Hawaii, knew about surfing. But after the invention of the television, a lot more people knew about surfing. You had TV shows and commercials who would broadcast surfing, and as more and more people had televisions, more and more people knew about surfing, and the internet only made it worse. Now more people know about surfing than any time in history. The second issue would have to be the sort of commodification of surfing. You see, a long time ago, the equipment that is required for surfing was only available on the coast, but now it's pretty much available to anyone with a computer and a credit card. You have a lot of innovation in surfing. I mean, you have like wetsuits now where people can surf in like very cold water, and this opens up a lot more access to people who want to surf. And there's also been a lot of innovation in the surfboards themselves. Surfboards used to be these like ridiculously like long surfboards. This is somewhat of an under exaggeration. I mean, they used to be like 12 foot, 13 foot, these ridiculously long boards. And I actually own an 8-foot board myself because they're easier to surf on. I have a 6-foot board right over there against the wall. I haven't surfed it in a couple of years because it's very difficult actually to surf on a short board. But these short boards led to a massive revolution in surfing. People were able to, surf the waves much faster than before. And of course, you can imagine why this would attract a lot more people to surfing. There's also just the population growth around the world. And lastly, the ability to travel to most parts of the world at a relatively low cost has also led to some conflict. A long time ago, it used to take like weeks, months, sometimes even years to travel to certain parts of the world. But now you can get to certain parts of the world in just like days, sometimes hours. And this has led to a lot of people just flocking popular surf spots, like the Bonsai Pipeline, pretty much all of North Oahu. If you go to any spot during the wintertime, it's just chocked full of people, and a lot of them aren't good at all. They just sit out there all day. But I'll get to that later. And you have to contrast this with how surfing used to be. It used to be a very niche sport. In fact, there isn't even a lot of studies on the topic of surfing because it has always been considered part of a sort of deviant subculture. And I guess sociologists just didn't see it as really that important. These men, and possibly women, who surf these spots grew up together and have developed a sort of subculture and even a system of seniority. They would help out each other. The younger surfers would go out and get their waves, but at a certain time of the day, the older surfers would come, like after working all day, and the younger surfers would get out because they knew it was their time to get out. They had a system worked out, and it seemed to work pretty well. But when non-local surfers showed up, this just completely disrupted the system and subculture that they've developed over, many years. And this led to a lot of conflict because these people, they get out there, they don't know when it's their turn to catch a wave. They go for every single wave that comes their way. And, it's very obnoxious. So this led to a lot of conflict between surfers. And I think probably the best example of this would have to be the North Shore of Oahu. Watch this video.
But surfing's sunny image is misleading, as revealed in a recent film called Bustin' Down the Door. The film celebrates how a group of surfers from Australia and South Africa, and not native Hawaiians, pioneered the professional surfers movement here in the 1970s.
Now, to break this down, there was a movie called Breaking Down the Door, which essentially said that the Europeans and the Australian surfers were responsible for bringing surfing to the forefront. While the Hawaiians, created surfing, the Europeans and Australians felt like, they cultivated and transformed the sport into something greater. So that must mean that they are superior surfers to the Hawaiians. And the foreign surfers who showed up there tended to be very arrogant, and they would cause a lot of safety problems for the other surfers. And this led to the creation of surf gangs, like the Wolf Pack or Tahui, to sort of reestablish that social order that they felt like they have lost.
So all these people come here from the mainland, from Australia, from wherever they came, and just really disrespect the place,
These guys came over here super aggressive, trying to catch every wave in the water, dropping in on the young kids, out of control. That's why the Hui was formed, is to make sure local people get their waves too.
Now, there could also be some other reasons for localism. In a study entitled Tragedy of the Waves by Deats, Martinez, and Sherer, is that how you pronounce it? The researchers found that the number of waves that a person catches mostly correlates to their merit as a surfer. Now, what are the implications of this? That means that if you're a good surfer, you're gonna be catching a lot of waves, but if you're not a good surfer, if you just, rented a board on the side of the beach and a wetsuit and have never done this before, you're not gonna catch anything. So what does that make you? That doesn't make you a surfer. That makes you a buoy, a living buoy that becomes a safety hazard and a pain in the rear end. And this could be a large part of the conflict. And I would say to people, if you can't surf, don't try to surf these spots, Go somewhere else and practice. You don't have to be there. In conclusion, I do not support the violence in any way, shape, or form, and I do not think anything truly justifies this behavior. I mean, if you look at the example of Lunada Bay, these are people who are just throwing a tantrum like a bunch of little kids who didn't get their way. I do think most of the time this has mostly just to do with selfishness, and I do think that's terrible because, in the surfing community, people need to support one another. I know it sucks that, more people are starting to get interested in your spot, and it might be a pain in the rear end to you, but at the same time, it's just something that you just may have to deal with. There's a reason why we have a distinction between public property and private property. Public property is available to everybody, and private property is your own private thing. You don't pay property taxes on the beach, you don't own the beach, and there's a reason for this. In America, we've decided that everybody should have a right to most of the coastline. I mean, there are certain areas where there are private beaches, but they're very far and few in between. And there's even like walkways between houses, so people do have access to the beach. However, you do need to know your skill level. If you can barely stand on the board, you probably shouldn't be surfing pipeline. As I showed you in the Tragedy of the Wave study, if you can't surf well, there's a high chance you're probably not gonna catch anything. You're probably just gonna be out there being a nuisance, and it's just not gonna be fun for you you or anybody else. And why would you want a surf pipeline in the first place? I mean, I understand it's like one of the most famous spots in the world, and that's why people want to go there. However, it's extraordinarily dangerous. I mean, you've got like 15, 20 foot faces, sometimes even higher, over like 3 feet of water. And let me tell you, it's not soft sand that's under that water either. These are very, very sharp coral reefs that are underneath the waves. So on and so forth that some people actually wear booties. When I went to surf in the Big Island, I actually had to buy these like ugly booty things. They're terrible. Let me show you them. Be right back. Do these look like something that's fun to wear? Do these look like these are comfortable? They're not, and they're pretty ugly too. I mean, just look at this. Jesus. Oh well, they come in handy somewhat. So yeah, I don't think it's a good idea to surf pipeline. Leave it to the kamikazes, the pros. Also, if you're a talented surfer and you decide to actually go to one of these spots, do yourself a favor and try to respect the locals, please. If you go out there and act like a jackass, it's really hard for me to have sympathy for you. If you go out there and you're rude, you know, you're taking up space, dropping in on people, just expect to get the shit kicked out of you eventually. I don't like the violence, but at the same time, I can't deny that it reaches a certain point where you pretty much deserve it. And what's worse is you make the rest of us look like jackasses as well, and they may not let anybody else surf because of you. So do yourself and do us a favor and at least try to respect the locals. Now, I know how annoying people find it when YouTubers rant about certain issues and don't offer any solutions, so allow me to propose some of my own besides the ones I just said. The first solution, I suppose, would be, you know, the local governments hypothetically stepping in and requiring permits to surf in certain areas. While this could curb tension by lowering the number of surfers who actually get to go to the beach and filter out all the pros from the beginners, I don't think I would support it because, in my opinion, it would violate multiple rights and the local governments might eventually abuse it, as governments usually do. A second solution that I personally would support is the further commodification of surfing with the creation of wave pools. Hear me out. Over the years, wave technology has become very advanced to the point to where they're able to create waves like 5-6 foot high. And these are a lot of fun. You know, these wave pools will, you know, draw people to them and will lessen the amount of people, you know, wanting to go to, like, you know, real surf spots. Beginners don't really want to surf high waves. They're not looking for like the 10-20 foot faces. They're looking for, like, you know, at most 4 foot, 5 foot, sometimes even just 3 foot little rink-a-dink waves. So I think most people would be pretty happy just surfing on an artificial wave pool. Now, there are some examples of these wave pools. The first example which I would talk about is the Kelly Slater Wave Ranch. This is probably one of the best artificial waves in the world, and it is powered by a machine that pulls a mechanical foil through the water, which pushes water up and creates a like 5 to 6 foot surfing wave. The only problem with this artificial wave is that Kelly Slater has the audacity to charge $10,000 per hour. I mean, come on, dude. How much money do you need? I mean, so I don't think you'll be able to afford that one. Most surfers don't just have $10,000 sitting just anywhere. So yeah, that one isn't gonna work. Now, I think a much better example of a wave pool would have to be at this place called BSR Cable Park. It is like a water park. There is this wave pool that is powered by an air generator, and the prices at this place are much better. And if you look at the wave, it's actually relatively decent. You know, they've created some artificial reefs under the water, which, you know, help create the wave, and it actually looks pretty good. So I might actually want to try out the place one day. That would be fun. So, you know, try out this place. We should create more wave pools like this and, you know, invest in more wave technology so that people will be drawn away from these beaches and this won't cause so much tension. I do think that local surfers sometimes need to be a bit more reasonable in how they handle non-local surfers, but at the same time, if somebody's being a jerk, let them know. So in the very end, if you're one of these people that's at a localized surf spot and, you know, you harass people and you try to kick people off your wave through, you know, multiple malicious means, please stop. I'm sure there's a much more reasonable way to do this. I mean, you may not make a lot of money, but try investing in some of these in like wave pool technology. So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed watching this. Please like, subscribe, and comment down below. Please tell me, what do you think? Do you think localism is a terrible thing, or do you think there's some reason behind it? Thank you all for watching. I hope you all have a great day, and as always, peace out, and God bless you all.